The top business stories live from the Sky News City studio. Sky News understands the northern leg of HS2 to Manchester is to be scrapped. We'll get industry reaction. The Chancellor talks about cost cutting and getting inflation down, but no mention of tax cuts. And Dame Sharon White is to step down at the end of her tumultuous 5-year term as chair of the John Lewis Partnership. Good afternoon, this is Business Live with me, Ian King. It's been rumoured for days now, but this afternoon Sky News understands that the northern leg of HS2 to Manchester is to be scrapped. It means the much-vaulted high-speed line to help level up the country would run from West London to Birmingham. Reaction is coming through now. The Liberal Democrats have accused Rishi Sunak of trashing the future economy of the country. Well, joining me now is Darren Kaplan. He's Chief Executive of the Rail Industry Association, who speaks for the rail supply community. Darren, welcome to you. You were looking for a commitment to the northern leg this week. It looks like you got the opposite.
Hello, Ian. Well, I think the first thing to say is actually we don't actually know what's going on. It really is chaos here at the Conservative Party conference today. I've been to different events, talked to different people, different politicians, stakeholders across the industry, and no one actually knows what's going on. So you speak to some people, they say it's definitely being scrapped. It's just a matter of announcement from the Prime Minister at some point in the future. If you speak to other people, they say, well, Number 10's actually putting back on that, and they're still deciding what they're going to do. So there's no way to treat a multi-billion-pound infrastructure scheme that affects so many people. It's absolute chaos when it comes to policy making on HS2 today.
What do you think the case for scrapping the second phase of HS2 would be? I mean, it all comes down presumably to value for money.
Well, there's not really a case. I mean, people cite cost, and part of that's down to the government specifications. They specified high levels. Then you've had chopping and changing on the scheme. So they've got rid of the eastern leg to Leeds. They got rid of the Goulburn link that enabled trains to go to Scotland. They've paused the link from Old Oak Common to Euston. So you're bound to incur costs. And then, of course, there's issues around inflation. But this is a 30, 40-year project. So inflation can come down over the years to come as well. So the issue with this is not about scrapping it, it's how can we make it cost effective. If the government's got an issue with it, get together with the rail industry, get together with rail suppliers who build the scheme, get together with all the stakeholders, and let's figure out a way of making it work. You don't just scrap it.
But the project is already way over budget, isn't it? I mean, that's an inescapable fact.
Well, as I said, this is a government scheme, and they've decided themselves. They know that they specified the specifications. They've been managing it all the way through. They have the power to chop and change what they want to, and they've made a bit of a dog's dinner of it so far. But as I said, if you work with us, if the government works with us, we can make a good scheme going forward. This is entirely down to the government's powers, but this is not the way to make policy when it comes to rail policy in the future. And rail is good for UK PLC. I mean, surveys show that it supports 700,000 jobs, £43 billion in GVA. Every pound you spend on rail, you generate £2.50 in the wider economy. £14 billion of tax revenues come to the rail industry. So it's not a cost on the UK, it's actually a good investment in the UK. And it can do so much for the government's own agenda on the economy, on levelling up, on decarbonisation. Scrapping HS2 sends out entirely the wrong signal on all those areas.
It may be possible that some of the money allocated for HS2 is put to other projects in the north of England. Would that satisfy you as an industry body?
Well, it doesn't quite work like that. The money allocated to HS2 is specifically for HS2 Phase 2. So the money goes back into a pot, and presumably after the election, different government departments will bid for that money. So the money can go to schools and hospitals and welfare, and it's fair enough. People can bid for the money they want to go into their public sector schemes. But it doesn't necessarily mean the money from HS2 will absolutely definitely go on transport schemes in the north. And if you speak to any northern leaders on rail, they absolutely want the full scheme to be built. They don't say we want to scrap it. They say we want the full HS2 scheme to Manchester, to Leeds, from Birmingham down to London, and that's how you get the full benefits of the scheme, the full best cost rate ratios, and we need the capacity going forward. What people don't realise is actually passenger numbers have been coming back to the rail industry, or to the rail sector, really strongly. In the last 6 months, 96% average when it comes to passenger return to rail. So in 20, 30 years' time, we're clearly going to need more capacity for the West Coast Main Line, the Midland Main Line, the East Coast Main Line, and HS2 is the fastest route to creating that capacity for the benefit of the rail network and the country at large.
OK, Darren, we have to leave it there. Appreciate you joining me this afternoon. Thank you. Some other business news stories for you now. And the water industry today sought permission from the industry regulator Ofwat to invest a record £96 billion into cleaning up rivers and tackling sewage spills. The investment would be made during the next 5-year regulatory period, beginning in April 2025, and is nearly double the £51 billion being invested during the current regulatory period. Some of the money will come from shareholders of the water companies, but under the proposals, the typical household bill in England would rise by £84 per year. Ofwat will now assess the proposals. The upmarket German footwear group Birkenstock is targeting a valuation of up to $9.2 billion when it floats on the New York Stock Exchange. That's more than the $8 billion that Birkenstock's majority owner, the private equity firm L. Catterton, was originally thought to be seeking. In a file with the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the owners of Birkenstock, which was founded in 1774, said they were looking to sell $1.58 billion worth of shares. Well, Birkenstock recently reported sales of $644 million for the 6 months to the end of March. That was up 19% on the same period a year earlier. And Dame Sharon White is to step down as chair of the John Lewis Partnership when her 5-year term comes to an end in February 2025. The partnership, which as well as the UK's biggest department store business owns the Waitrose supermarket chain, said this morning that Dame Sharon had asked the partnership board to initiate the process to appoint a successor. The partnership recently warned that its turnaround will take 2 years longer than expected to achieve. But when I spoke to her last month, she was very upbeat.
We think it's going to be a very strong Christmas for us. And in addition, we've got some very significant efficiency savings effectively already banked, which will come through to the tune of about £100 million over the course of the whole year. So feeling reasonably optimistic, cautiously optimistic, and certainly expecting the full year's performance this year to be stronger than last year.
Now, excess salt consumption is one of the biggest contributors to cardiovascular disease globally. Well, now a company that makes low-sodium salt with half the sodium content of regular salt is floating on AIM. Microsalt is looking to raise between £10 to £15 million, with up to £2.5 million worth of shares being made available to retail investors. I've been speaking with its chief executive, Rick Guiney.
Microsalt is a truly revolutionary health benefit for the world. And it's a new technology. We developed it about 5 years ago. And the time is now. We're starting to bring the solutions to the world's largest food manufacturers, some of which are in the UK. We're very excited about being in the UK and its love of food companies.
Will you be looking to raise new money in the IPO?
Yes, we are.
And how will that be spent? How will that be invested?
Well, you know, when you sell to the world, you need people to sell to the world. You have a lot of languages, a lot of locations. When you sell to the world, you need to reach out to those people in specific locations. So we're going to add to our staff, we're going to add to our manufacturing facilities so that we can keep up with the demand.
Why list in London when the majority of your sales are in the United States?
London's a great place to be for a small food company. We find that the London market is more tuned to food evolution and food technology than some of the other markets are across the world. Several of our large corporation customers have key headquarters here in London. So there's a natural magnet for us to be here anyway. So it seemed like a great fit.
I know you sell crisps under your own Salt Me brand. How do sales break down between your brands and stuff you do for third parties?
Well, you know, we're a salt company. We make Microsalt. The whole crisp business for us called Salt Me was just a proof of concept. People didn't believe us. We said, okay, we'll make something and you can eat it. Well, they came out so great that they're now in over 1,000 stores in the US. But we're really focusing on the B2B market so that we can bring as much solution to the world as quickly as possible.
So tell me about the IP. How do you produce low-sodium salt?
Basically, what we do is we shrink it to almost a micron, which is nearly invisible. And by doing that, we change the surface area. By changing the surface area, when that crystal of salt hits your tongue, it's much more intense. So you ingest less salt, less sodium.
So from where do you access the salt?
Salt is one of the most common ingredients in the food business. It's available worldwide. And so we currently buy our salt from two main places. Our sea salt comes from Australia, and our mine salt comes from the US. But there is salt solutions everywhere in the world.
And where was the IP devised? Who came up with the idea?
It came out of the University of Arkansas, and from two scientists who created it. The University of Arkansas has a well-renowned food institute.
Right. Are you surprised that no one's done this before? I mean, the sort of Tate and Lyles of this world?
Well, yes and no. The previous solutions contained potassium chloride, which did lower your sodium, but has a severe and metallic aftertaste. And that was what they had, and that's what they may do with. We came along with a new technology. I can't explain why someone else didn't think of it first, but luckily for us, we did.
And how long do you have a patent on the IP?
Yes, we do. We have several patents going on. The closest in one is 2030. So we feel like we're a very strong position in the market.
You spent your entire career in fast-moving consumer goods, some of the biggest names in the industry. What attracted you to come and run this business?
Well, you know, it's really great when you go to work and you actually try to help somebody. And this is not sentimental. I have a 15-year-old son, and it would be great that he doesn't have a heart attack when he's 55, because I was able to take some of the sodium out of his food. And people don't even know where the sodium is. They think that they don't salt their steak, they're doing something great, and they are, but they don't realize the amount of sodium in all the other foods they consume. So that's our mission. Our entire leadership team is committed. We're going to help people live better lives.
Which governments around the world are making the most progress in encouraging salt reduction? Latin
America, South America, Mexico, followed by valiant efforts in the UK and in Canada. But the Latin American community, they have a history of having very unhealthy food. So the governments are responding proportionally by making the regulations for sodium consumption very strict, including penalties for production, penalties for packaging on the front of the bags. They're very serious about it.
I noticed you didn't say the United States when you reeled off that list.
I did not. The FDA they like to suggest. And that's great, and I'm happy for them, and all those suggestions help us, but we're lagging in intensity from a government regulations point as compared to the UK and Canada and all those other markets.
Now, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt gave a bullish speech to the Conservative Party conference this afternoon in Manchester, during which he highlighted the UK's post-pandemic economic performance has been better than that of France and Germany. But the two main policy announcements had been trailed in advance: a pledge to raise the national living wage to £11 an hour and tougher sanctions on welfare claimants. But there was also news of a hiring freeze in the civil service. Well, joining me now to talk about this is Chris Hayward. He's Policy Director of the City of London Corporation, and Michael Moore, Chief Executive of the British Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, who are both at the conference. Afternoon, gentlemen. Chris, let me begin with you first. Did you hear what you wanted to today?
Well, yes, I think the government set out what their policy platform is in going into the next general election. Clearly, what we're calling for in the City of London is for a plan for economic growth from whoever forms the next government, and we want to see that happen. But yes, broadly speaking, I think the Chancellor gave a commendable performance.
He did mention tax cuts, of course. Liz Truss did. She talked about cutting corporation tax to 19%.
Well, you know, everyone would love to see tax cuts, but when they're affordable, and we have to remember that's against the basis of a really substantial deficit still in the economy. So for whichever party is in government, they've got to take into account the affordability of when tax cuts can actually be placed.
Well, Michael, let me bring you in. The national living wage is being raised to £11 an hour. A lot of the people affected probably work for some of the companies owned by your members. What's going to be the impact on businesses?
I think that businesses will, broadly speaking, say it's the right thing to do, and they will look to see how they absorb that, but also ensure that people around the country that they're very conscious are having a really challenging time get the opportunity to live appropriately and comfortably. The broader point, and Chris was referencing it there, is that this is very fine if you've got a period of growth. At the moment, the economy is in a really slightly odd position where we're not quite sure if it's growing or not. Our members are investing for the long term. They want to get certainty around policy frameworks and a growth agenda that will see them through the next election and beyond. And I think that what the Chancellor has been saying, both in his speech and then in other sessions on the conference floor about the Mansion House Compact, have been very welcome. So we'd like to see more of that, and that will give the confidence to invest through the cycle and into the next Parliament and beyond.
Now, the big new news in the Chancellor's speech was, of course, this hiring freeze in the civil service. I mean, you've worked in government. Do you think it's going to be possible to freeze jobs in this way?
It's often an aspiration that is set out. It can be harder to do than politicians may wish. I think the signal that is being sent is that government is doing its bit to ensure that the costs of government are not increasing beyond what can be afforded. I think that's got its place, but more broadly, what we need are to ensure that we've got the policies, the frameworks in place that will encourage international capital to be here in the UK, investing in UK investment opportunities, and with confidence that the frameworks around those policy ideas, whether it's the energy transition, AI or life sciences, that those are going to last for a decent period of time. So all of that alongside things like a hiring freeze will work, but we need those long-term signals.
Chris, are you going to be going to the Labour conference next week?
I will be in Liverpool. I'll be at all 4 of the party conferences altogether, and so we'll be very interested to see what the Labour alternative is, what they're going to put forward next week. But just touching back on the point that Michael's just been talking about, anything in relation to the civil service which adds to productivity, which is what I think where the government is coming from, is got to be a good thing. I also, incidentally, was pleased to hear the Chancellor set out that he wants us to be the technology and scientific global capital of the world. I think the Mansion House Compact will allow us to invest in British businesses, high-growth British businesses, and that's a start. So I think that was welcome news as well to hear from the Chancellor.
OK, Chris, Michael, we have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Good to see you both this afternoon. Thank you. Still to come here on Business Live. We'll have a look at how the markets have done. First day of the new quarter. Don't go away.
It started off as a project to do a piece of work which would be a composite of, say, 80 portraits and have it as one piece. And so from a distance, it would look quite abstract. And then as you got closer, you'll see the sort of personalities of each portrait. And that's a portrait I just did of a friend's dog who passed away last year. So I trained at the Royal Academy and learned. We did a lot of drawing from life, and there was a lot of portraiture as well. So I was inspired by that. My father was an artist, and he did some wonderful portraits. So I suppose it's in my psyche, really. Unfortunately, 10 years ago, my fiancée passed away, Debbie, and she said, if you can do 80, you can do 100. If you can do 100, you can do 200. And she said, you know, you could actually do the city of St. David's. And I just thought, what an amazing idea. And it's sort of her legacy as well. And it's very much, you know, the way I've dealt with bereavement and focusing on people. And I've met some amazing people through it and some wonderful characters. And you get to know a certain sort of facet of their characters, an insight into who they are. And it's done me the power of good. And I just absolutely adore doing them. My philosophy is just to carry on doing it. I love doing them so much, and it sort of centers me, and it's something, as I said earlier on, a focal point for me. And it sort of, so by next year, I hope to achieve 1,000. Well, I don't hope, I will achieve 1,000. So that seems a considerable number to exhibit.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Fly Emirates. Fly better. Fly Emirates. Fly better. Thank you.
Well, European stocks have made a disappointing start to the final quarter of the year. All of the main continental European indices finished deeply in negative territory, down around 1% or so apiece. There were some gainers, though, and the Austrian semiconductors group Osram rose by 6%. That's after its finance director told the press its financing problems are resolved. Well, here in London, it's been a similar situation. The FTSE finishing down 1.25% in a broad-based sell-off in which just a handful of constituents finished higher. In percentage terms, the biggest FTSE faller was the Lloyd's of London insurer Beazley Group. That was off 4.25%. Meanwhile, Prudential and the distributor RS Group were both off by 3% or so apiece as well. One of the rare gainers in the session was BAE Systems, finished up best part of 1% higher. That was after it was awarded a £4 billion submarine contract under the AUKUS programme. Outside the FTSE, XP Power has fallen by 49% after it issued a profits warning, while the motor dealer Pendragon is up another 5% after Lithia, the US car dealer seeking to buy most of its UK operations, improved its offer. Over on Wall Street, both the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 have opened higher, following the worst month for them both since December last year. Features this afternoon include the chip maker Nvidia. That's ahead by more than 3%, following a supportive comment from one of the brokers. On the foreign exchange markets, well, the story remains one of dollar strength. The greenback is up at a 10-month high nearly against a basket of currencies. As you can see, sterling off by more than 0.5% against the dollar. It's up by 0.1% against the euro. The single currency, meanwhile, off by 0.2% against the dollar. As for the oil price, well, it sold off on Friday evening. It steadied this morning and it's continued to drift this afternoon. A barrel of Brent crude will currently set you back $91.08 a barrel. That's off nearly 1.25% on the session. Well, joining me now is James Henderson, Portfolio Manager on the Global Equity Income Team at Janus Henderson Investors. James, good to see you this afternoon. Not a quoted company, but a lot of interest today in Sharon White's decision to step down after 5 years at the John Lewis Partnership. She hasn't had a lot of luck in that role, has she?
No, it would have been a very difficult job. If you think of the last 5 years, you've had COVID, you've now got the cost of living crisis. And to think when she came in, probably it was the king of the high street, wasn't it? So that when expectations are that great, it's more difficult. Whilst, you know, you contrast that with something like Archie Norman, where at Marks and Sparks expectations were so low, so you can go in and bang, do something. But when managing a business when it's at the top is more difficult.
That's absolutely right. And I mean, another star performer during the last few years has been Next. So it is possible to navigate these businesses. I guess it was what she inherited that was slightly problematic.
Yes, and that's right. Things like Marks and Sparks, 25 years of worries, 25 years of problems. The need to change. And that's a much easier place to be than where John Lewis didn't cut its bonuses before. It had an aura of being the top, and that's always makes management more difficult. So I think she's had 5 very difficult years. I wonder if anyone could have done the job successfully. Can you say definitively that M&S has turned the corner now under Archie Norman? Well, it appears to, in the numbers. It appears to the shopper. They're enjoying the experience much more. And the offering, both in clothes and in food, has improved, and the value in food has definitely got better. So the signs are it has turned the corner.
Now, we learned today that house prices have fallen year on year by more than 5%. What are you hearing from housing-related companies right now?
Well, they were telling me how desperately difficult things were for a year now. In fact, it could just be that we've seen the worst on interest rates. Some of them were preparing for interest rates of 7%, and maybe they've peaked at 5.25%. So there's a little bit more confidence that they've taken the action required, they've positioned themselves for this very difficult climate, and it may be Recoveries start when the last bit of the bad news is in there. We're getting towards that point now.
That's a positive note on which to end. James, very good to see you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
That's it from me. I'm back again at 11:30 tomorrow morning with Business Live, our morning edition. Do stay tuned. Next up, it's the News Hour with Jonathan Samuels. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. See you tomorrow. Cheerio.